Hello, this is Silas, and in this video I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on President Donald J. Trump's first year as a President of the United States of America, and just a few other related things. So if you've been following this channel or my blog at rantaton.com, you know that I've been following Donald J. Trump rather closely, or at least rather interested in Donald J. Trump from the run-up to the election, and as you can see from the video that's playing right now, I was there at the inauguration. There's going to be links below to that megapixel, CNN gigapixel thing. If you guys are there, definitely check it out. It's still up. Since the election, and first I must say that I did not collude with Donald J. Trump in any possible way, because like recently I saw a picture from this gigapixel thing of some Russian businessmen, and they were saying, oh, this is proof, or this is another example of showing how there must have been Russian collusion, because why are these businessmen in such choice locations for the inauguration? Hey, people from different places attended this inauguration. In this previous year, I've been splitting my time between New York City and Nairobi, and both places have given me a unique vantage point to see what has unfolded during the administration of Donald J. Trump. New York City, for those that do not know, is a very liberal, politically left-leaning city. But within this city, I had made a close group of very active, dedicated, involved supporters of Trump and people on the conservative side of the political spectrum. It has been a great experience for me to know these people, become friends with them, engage in a lot of political debates, life debates, talk about things we like, things we don't like, etc., etc. And then when you come to Nairobi, you're out of this American influence. You're seeing things from a different culture, with almost no one discussing Trump as a direct topic. Occasionally you'll see it on the news and the newspapers. Well, there's less of the social influence that people kind of disagree with what... Okay, not less. It's a different kind of thing. People disagree with me on politics in the United States of America, in New York City. But here in Kenya, I have disagreements with people for a whole lot of different things that I don't necessarily discuss as much and are not as pertinent. So in the span of 24 hours, at the end of January 2018, I saw the leader of the opposition coalition here in Kenya, Raila Odinga, hold a symbolic swearing-in as a people's president of Kenya. He and many in the country had made the claim that the current president, Uhuru Kenyatta, is illegitimate for several reasons, including having rigged the recent elections. There have been reports of extrajudicial killings throughout Kenyatta's first term that actually went on through to the election. And this is just a continuation of the stereotypical corruption that you see in developing nations. Although accounting for the recent revelations that we're seeing about the US politics, this situation of corruption may not be about the amount of it, but the quality of it, the kind of sophistication and lack of being caught in certain places. And even that might be changing with different revelations that are coming out during this administration about previous administration. Some say this banana republic is already in because Donald J. Trump is still president after the more collusion with Russia, but we'll also see what happens with revelations about previous administrations, and we'll get to see if they get away with it like African leaders do, or if there'll be a change and something different will happen. And it's not just the political aspect of it, or just things that are done, words, laws, perks, things like that, but actual coming down to murders, things like who is Seth Rich. A quick summary for those who don't know: he was a staffer in the Democratic Party, and he's released some information about what was happening in the party to people. Then shortly after, he died in what is considered to be a questionable robbery attempt, leading a significant number of people to think that he may have been killed for what he did. So this is a topic that I'll most likely expand on soon, although it is negative in nature, the fact that this corruption is so widespread. But it's kind of positive. The silver lining on this cloud is that it shows a shared humanity within people of different races, cultures, countries, etc. So in this video, in this presentation, I'm going to include some comparisons between the two political situations that I've been experiencing over this last year. So back to the unprecedented president of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump. He just recently gave his first State of the Union address, and this speech was received rather well, even by many that do not support him. And coming up to this address, there had been many who have been disparaging how effective of a president he has been. Now, ignore the fact that sometimes these same people will say, oh, he's ruining the country, and then they'll switch back and like, oh, he's not doing anything, so which one is it, ruining or doing nothing? But anyway, they may forget, or more likely intentionally ignore, that many in his Republican Party were in large part against him until, and in many cases since, his inauguration. Several of the leaders of what is increasingly being revealed as a monoparty of insiders and establishment politicians are still at best a Facebook friends level of political relation to him, where they just associate with him but don't know anything or actually would never actually invite him anywhere in public or want to be with him as a typical friend or supporter or teammate. So as for Donald J. Trump, he's clear about what he wants to do, if not how he wants to do it. His intent from the start until today is to make America great again, and that means America first. Though I and many others are still coming to get a better understanding of what that means to him, it for sure doesn't mean toe any whatever the current Republican Party's line is. After hearing the State of the Union speech, I am confident that there will be more people to help do whatever he wants to do. After 2018 and subsequent elections, through to 2024 if he decides to go with the Trump 2020. I think I need to get the clip of my boy Newton saying Trump 2020 the way he says it. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Shout out to Newt if you're listening to this. Team Newt. Check out his YouTube, funny stuff. The opposition is at a loss for who to run against him in the upcoming elections. Their testing of the waters with this young Joe Kennedy at their State of the Union rebuttal was much more memeable than it was memorable. Really, if you watched it, tell me something he said that was not an establishment talking point. How did he look though? How many memes have you seen about that questionable fluid situation that he had going on his mouth? So the left may not be able to meme, but they do provide top grade material for memeing. It's almost as if the Democrats were intentionally trying to top Yeb as the most embarrassing political dynasty candidate in the current year. Not the current year, but the current era, current political era. So with enemies like these, who needs to be worried about questionable support of supposed friends? So meanwhile in Kenya, the current president is the son of the nation's first president, which was Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. Now the head of the opposition coalition is son of Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, who was also a leading figure in the fight for independence. So here in Kenya, you also have this battle of political dynasty. This actually even shouldn't be that surprising. Most mammals, I think, keep leadership in kind of a genetic situation. Humans in general, we still have royal families in a lot of places, and that used to be how most societies were organized, with some royalty. And even when it came to just regular life, somebody had the surname Potter because their family was Potters, and if they were born into the Potter family, they would learn the trade and then be potters. So though I'm not against the actual institution of inheritance or this kind of hereditary apprenticeship, since humans are flawed, the results are not always the same. But anyway, that goes back to the youth of the country. Imagine kids of the founders of the nation, George Washington's son, and then maybe John Quincy Adams' son, battling out for politics. That's the kind of infancy that you're talking about in some of these developing nations. I had mentioned in a previous video that the opposition coalition intended to have this swearing in of Raila Odinga as the people's president, this inauguration of sorts. Now this has happened, it did happen on January 30th in Uhuru Park. The government tried closing down the park, the people decided they're going to go anyway. There was that whole trying to cock chop block, by having some kind of free circumcisions for any males that wanted to go there. That didn't happen, so people actually ended up going there. So again, just as you have in the United States of America, a very vibrant and active opposition to the presidency, you have that here in Kenya. One kind of difference though, well, similarity and difference, bear with me. There is undeniable media bias in the United States and other countries in the West. The election coverage, especially in the United States of America, was skewed greatly in favor of the Democratic Party and especially their favorite Hillary Clinton. Here in Kenya, during this opposition inauguration event, some major local networks were prevented from broadcasting the opposition's event. Since then, arrests have been made of some of the people who were involved in the event and warrants issued for many others, including actual reporters. So different things happening for the same reason. In the United States of America, things like the Women's March are just international news covered on every single station. You have anchors just completely outright insulting the president. Here in Kenya, the government is actually trying to shut down broadcasts. Imagine if that happened. In the United States of America, somebody says, hey, you're insulting and interrupting this interview, so you need to not be in this press room. You can still cover it, you're just not going to be in the press room. And people are freaking out. Oh, he's killing the press. He wants to shut down the press. It's just more reminders of how many in the world would actually risk their lives to just have the kind of experiences that Americans consider life-threatening. So even your political strife is exceptional, and that is an example of American exceptionalism if I've ever found one. So someone on the political left was hopeful that the higher number of Republicans compared to Democrats congresspeople that weren't running for seats or retiring in the 2018 election, coming up for this 2018 election, they were saying, oh, do they fear the oncoming blue wave? No. And it's almost sad and for sure telling that this is the sort of thing that people on the left are clinging on to. As mentioned, Trump is not exactly your typical Republican, nor is the party actually united under him. Not only was Trump previously a Democrat that was actually embraced by many people on the Democratic side of the aisle, for any assumptions or things to be actually taken from this number of people not running or retiring, you'd have to know how many of them were explicitly or covertly anti-Trump and have found it futile to remain in office, or have done some of their own internal polling and know that it's likely time to move on to greener pastures. Now, some of these people are also in Republican strongholds, and this is something that happens in politics. So it's a captain of a new ship, insert name of congressional district here, of the red Republican fleet. So it's more a change of who is steering the ship, not a decommissioning of the actual ship. Then there's some that, shocking to some, they have better things to do in their lives than be politicians. Many may simply choose they just want to spend more time with family, because sometimes if you're a congressperson, you have to be in Washington, D.C., and you leave your family back in the state or location that you represent. Some of these people may think that, oh, it's a favorable business environment, and it's time for them to start some other project that they're more passionate about. So yes, some are going to step down because the situation that supported them being in Congress has changed. In some situations, many backers have dried up in this new environment. Maybe the draining of the swamp will expose some of their footprints and other incriminating evidence, and certainly some are actually going to step down on principle out of objections or to utter loathing of who and what Trump is and represents. This whole impending blue wave thing is just another example of confirmation bias, where it's tempting to not analyze data if it can support a favorable outcome. So no, there will be no blue wave. At most, what you're going to see is, this is something my nephew used to do. He used to call these, after it rained, he would call the puddles on the left after muddy puddles. And then he would wear his galoshes and go jump around in them. So that's at most what you're going to see, these kind of scattered splashes all around the country. So President Trump has done a lot in this previous year. There's other people who have gone over the actual stats. I may actually leave a link below. There's some people on Reddit and other places that compile the actual things that he's accomplished and things that he's done and things that he hasn't, etc., etc. I would venture to say that by 2020, if you say his people when you're actually talking about the larger parts of governance, that would actually be more an accurate of a description of what you're talking about. And this is a common thing in American politics for sure. Governments that tend to have relatively peaceful transitions between administrations have this happen. Former President Obama had a period of a few years where he had Bush's people in there and older regime Democrats. Former President Bush before him had a time when he had Clinton's people in there and older regime Republicans. And the latter two, with Bush and Clinton, were far more standard bearers of their respective party than Obama was at the outset, and that Trump ever has or will be. And even with these cases where you had these lifelong politicians that were archetypical of the kind of president of these parties, you still had a transitionary period when you're switching gears between what was happening and what they wanted to do. And again, it's depressing to have to mention this always, but this whole hypocrisy thing or this lack of consistency, the positive things that are happening, people say, oh, the stock market, all these positive things, low black unemployment, that's due to what Obama did. But none of the failures of things, of getting Trump's actual things done, are like, oh yeah, this is actually because people that are still on from Obama's time, this is actually because of influence of policies that are still on from Obama's time. That's why he hasn't gotten these things done. Anything good that Trump does or anything good that happens over this last year was because of things Obama did previously. Anything bad or anything that didn't happen this year was completely because Trump is incompetent and is trying to destroy the country. So the level The level of the stage that this political theater is playing out on must be acknowledged. Former President Obama was the first to really benefit from running an election in the age of mass social media. And like all white folks are prone to do, Donald J. Trump came in and appropriated what the black man did first in running of his campaign. Am I right? Fist in the air, hashtag half black campaign strategies matter, and things like that. But though the revolution will not be televised, everything and anything can and will be streamed. So we can see how Trump captivated the public and outmaneuvered the powers that be. Other countries have learned from this. Because despite what Obama and many others have tried to do in this whole effort to have America lead from the back, countries all around the world still look to America as an example, as a beacon, something to aim for, something to try and strive to be like. As I mentioned, there was effective media blackouts where some stations and some sources were just covering Hillary Clinton a lot more than Bernie Sanders, and then they got to the point where a vast majority of the coverage of Donald J. Trump's campaign and administration since then has been utterly negative. So during this opposition event, the local channels, the local broadcasters that were not allowed to broadcast on television and radio, they decided to go online and broadcast on their YouTube channels. I'm going to leave a link below to the broadcast, the stream that I watched, which was on Citizen TV. And also had some political pundits come on after and break down what was occurring if you guys are interested in that. So there's also many international sources doing this. So even if you don't cover it, other people are going to cover it. And that's a similar thing you saw in the United States of America, where CNN, NBC, ABC, these major broadcasters were doing their own slanted view of things. Even Fox TV, Fox News Channel has their own slanted view of things. But they have the counterbalance of having CNN and these other people. So you had the new media come in and give their own coverage of it. You had people having the ability to just go there with their camera, record things, and stream it online to have other people see it. I actually participated in some of this by going to some of these events and actually recording things and seeing how it is to actually record the reporters or record the events and have people directly interact with the content. So it's like you're doing an end run around the people you used to have, the gatekeepers of information. Now it's power's in your hands, you can get the information. If you are uninformed, it's almost your fault. But back to the actual event. So this event, there were fears of security threats and other unknowns that contributed to what seemed to be a delayed, disorganized, and then stunted event. But it occurred and people saw. I will admit that maybe only 10% of the population here in Kenya actually has convenient access to internet accessible devices that they would actually be able to catch these streams on. And out of that 10%, only maybe 50% of them would actually choose to make time to actually watch it. So preventing the radio and TV coverage here in Kenya still does have an actual massive effect. As for the cultural appropriation angle here, what do you think of reverse cultural appropriation? Because check this chant out. So that was a chant of "the people united will never be defeated." When I heard that, that gave me some chills of disgust, since it's a chant that I had regularly heard from attending and viewing several anti-Trump events and protests in the United States of America. As I said in the previous video, appropriation is appropriate and is something that's done across cultures, across peoples, for many various reasons. As mentioned, attending some of these anti-Trump events and protest demonstrations and the sort, it was part of this Trump Train to Nagaland project. After thinking of what I had seen, this was towards the end of 2016, thinking of what I had seen in the few years leading up to the election of Donald J. Trump, I thought I would begin this project. I was thinking, what does Trump's election signify, not just to the United States, but to the world? What would his presidency entail and change? What has it changed about me at the onset, which I would describe myself, my political stance, as apathy to advocacy of anarcho-capitalism? And when I say anarcho-capitalism, please don't envision Antifa and associated black-clad or otherwise live-action role-playing so-called anarchists. or the central bank issued and controlled fiat currency, which is taxed by governments that fund the instruction of citizens en masse, then enter heavily regulated marketism that people try to call capitalism. Instead, I mean anarchy as in no leaders or class that's above the laws that they set for the general public, and markets where competition, including in capital, is a central part of the economy, and regulations are not arbitrarily created and enforced. I had no real hope back in 2014, 20, this leading up to getting more into politics and trying to define what my political stance was, coming from the non-aggression principle and arriving at anarcho-capitalism as the most optimal or favorable or suggested form of government and civilization and control societal organization that I could think of. I had no real hope of this being realized. That led me to the apathy, to the apathetic situation that I was in towards politics. But then there I was, having experienced the election of one Donald J. Trump as the President of the United States of America. And I was actually thinking, you know, I wouldn't mind that if this upcoming January, when I attended that inauguration, I could say that the man taking the oath was actually my president. So, how exactly did I get there? How exactly was President Trump going to make America great again? Why does he even want to do it? What does it mean? Where will it matter? Who will be affected? Is he just your stereotypical politician that is a darling of corporations, or actually someone with a genuine love of countrymen? It can be both, since corporations can be owned and staffed by Americans. Helping them would help Americans in that situation. If you're helping a corporation that is owned, created, and started by Americans, that hires Americans, then the success of that corporation will be the success of those Americans and their families and their communities and their country. And related to jobs. Related to jobs for Americans, I've been going through the immigration process, and that is one of the things you have to do for legal immigration. Some countries have treaties between the United States of America and that country, and then you have to prove that if you're starting a job there, if you're starting some investment there, how many Americans are you going to hire? On average, they want it to be around 10. So though I could be wrong about this, and it could be something more nefarious, it could be something more base, he could just be more typical than I think he is. One thing I am sure of, at least as sure of as I can be about someone that I have never met, is that Trump is nowhere as close to the Hitlerian level of dread that some have claimed this man deserves. And this is part of the boon or blessing or chance or positive aspect about this whole thing, is that his standards have been set so low. The expectations that people have are so horrible of Trump that if he's just average, he's going to be a lot more positive than what people expect. And he's not going to be average. Nothing in his history prior to becoming a candidate and then winning the presidency and then being a president for a year has led me to think that this man is somebody that does things in an average way, or has actions that result in average things happening. So, I and many of you out there are at least trying to go off of what he has said when asked about his intentions of being President of the United States of America. Many others, though, are going on feels, fears, fake news, falsehoods, and other foibles that are actually almost intentionally not based on any fact. So watching this recent opposition event here in Kenya, I thought of how few Kenyan flags I saw. Now Kenya is definitively divided on tribal lines. Many people consider their identities, their personal identities, based on family, tribe, and a distant third would be nationality. In the State of the Union address, President Trump mentioned that Americans all share the same flag. These two things reminded me of how few American flags you tend to see at these anti-Trump events. More often, they create their own flags or fly those of other countries or other political things, like a regular one being the yellow hammer and sickle on the red background of the communist flag, which, yeah, actual communists. Just wow. And I've got a question for the communists out there, that are living in non-communist countries? Are you just trying to turn those countries into communists, and why have into communist countries? But why haven't you actually just gone to a country that already is communist? I mean, that's also one thing I kind of wonder about, like the Islam thing. But I'll have this in separate questions. This is not the whole like, oh, if you don't like it here, why don't you just leave thing. I get it that you can change places, but in this situation, there's actually viable places you can actually out and go. But not only do I think people mean things figuratively when they say literal, like they're not actual communists because they don't really understand what communism is. I think they also have this kind of underlying thing where they realize, oh, their family and people they like and care for are in this location. They don't necessarily know why. And they can't apply this to understand why people coming from other countries without becoming Americanized, etc., or changing to the place that they are, may also come from that whole thing where they have attachment to the places that they came from and they may want to turn the place that they're in to the place that they came from. But that's a whole lot. That needs an entire separate video to discuss that whole situation. So anyway, back to the protests and the lack of flags. So kind of the good news or the silver lining to this cloud, seeing the similarities between these protesters in these two different countries, kind of is another signal, another sign of this shared humanity that we have across nations, countries, races, etc. Now this doesn't take away the problem, but this might hint that solutions may be similar, that if you can figure out how to solve one problem somewhere, because humans are involved in this problem somewhere else, you may be able to just tweak it a little bit, communicate it in a little way, different way, translate it for the people and the culture and the location, and then have that solution occur in that place. So back to the event here in Kenya. I think if tribes themselves, the actual like biological tribes from the different regions, the Kikuyus, the Kalenjins, the Luyas, the Luos, had flags that represented their tribes, I think you'd see them flying them at these kind of events. There's iconography that goes along with the political parties and coalitions and things that come about. Before there was like the Orange Party that was the Orange Party was the coalition before, which was Raila Odinga's party. And yeah, they wore orange and actually would carry actual oranges, the fruits and things like that. The Jubilee Party actually is red and white, has this dove and thing like that. I don't know what the current NASA iconography is. NASA is a coalition, the opposition coalition going on right now. But this iconography is there, and it's not as spread out. You don't see as many signs and flags and things as you do in the United States of America. But if the culture was that way, I think you'd see that. And actually, that may be interesting to see if you can actually develop maybe a business idea in there, developing flags and iconography for different tribes. But anyway, different things happening for the same reasons. And moving on, why should I care about politics anywhere? Why should anyone care? Why should you care? Most of us have families and loved ones that we care to look after. Most of us want to grow this family by establishing one of our own. In many cases, while pursuing these related goals, we help other people who are unrelated, at least in the close biological sense. I have an unusual upbringing, and it has involved a lot of travel and has resulted in people I care for being spread across many locations, nations, and cultures. But the questions are still important. Where is your family at? Where do people ask you to attend their weddings, attend their establishments of their new families? Where are your nieces, nephews, aunts, uncles? Whatever location or locations come up for the answers of those questions are the location and locations that you will most want to improve and be. Now I think about the level of family and connections that President Donald J. Trump has made and still possesses and still cares for over his 70 plus years of international life. And simply focusing on a better life for his close friends and family could mean he has to make America as a nation great again. And with America still being the measuring stick or goal for many other nations, this has global implications. Now from that, whether you are one that's affected positively or negatively indirectly by what happens during this Making America Great Again process is another question entirely. But I am still confident that it's a net positive for everyone, even if they can't see it quite at the moment, especially Americans who don't actually see this. But as I said before, those people may not really consider themselves to be Americans, which is a key thing to think about when, especially with this support for illegal immigration or just the support for immigration. You have a lot of people who are legally Americans who probably don't feel like they're personally or they don't feel like they're attached to something called America as a nation. So it makes sense that they would think, oh yeah, if people come in who are also not really attached to anything like America as a nation, as a culture, they can just legally be made American and they will be as American as they are. Now, I know there's actual reasons, like they want people to vote, but I think this is the leadership, the top brass in the Democrat Party, are like, yeah, let's bring these people in because they're going to vote for us. But I think your everyday Democrat that supports this, your everyday leftist that supports this, could be more supporting it over a lack of their own attachment to something as an American identity. So they think anyone who just comes in legally becomes American. That's all you need to be of a place. Otherwise, they would have to face the fact that they may not be of a place, even though they're legally Americans. And this isn't that simple of a thing to face. I know a lot of people might take it for granted who do have that connection to a place, connection to a location, but I personally, from my life and other things that have happened, have had a struggle trying to find that home base, that place I can call home, that place I feel like I'm a part of, that community that I'm like, yeah, this is who I am, this is my team, this is my tribe. So I think the people who have tribes, who have that connection, and this is a situation where I'm talking to conservatives more in the United States of America who have this connection to their country, to their nation, to this greater community, I think they should also understand why some people on the left may be struggling with people who claim that there is such a thing because it may be something they want but are unable to actually have. Now in Kenya, it's a lot easier to see because people can see, okay, this person is a Kikuyu, they identify with Kikuyus, I can see that they have a tribe. And if they don't have that, it's easier to see that disconnect. In the United States of America, tribalism in that sense is not as strong and clear to see. In addition, for me personally, it's a lot easier to expect this coming from my background, understanding that, yes, you've moved to different continents, different countries, so you've had different cultures, so it's not easy to be attached to one. But I don't think it's coincidental that a lot of people who live in cities either left places that had more of a close kind of community because they didn't fit in there, or actually grew up in cities where there's so many different cultures and things like that, so it's kind of harder for you to select or latch on to an identity that you feel comfortable with being a part of, being a part of this tribe. But back to this. So during the campaign, then candidate Donald Trump was asked repeatedly why he was running. The answers generally involve different ways of saying he loved the country and he thought it was in need of fixing. But why Trump? Why him? Why now? These and other questions were why people were asking specifically about Donald J. Trump. As I mentioned, I want to base things off of things that he's said, things that he's done, and I want to highlight this particular occasion. It was right after somebody had rushed the stage during one of his campaign rallies. And he was on stage and I think he had a little candid off the cuff moment with the crowd that was there. And he said this: "And to think I've had such an easy life. What do I need this for? What do I need this for? I've done great. I love this country. We're going to make this country great again. It's payback time." So what if you actually believe him? So there's some out there that say Donald J. Trump was given everything that he had. I disagree with that. He was given $1 million, he was given guidance, he was given love. This is something most parents would willingly do for their children, but he took that and made a lot out of it. I personally know there's opportunities and things that I haven't made the most out of. I think a lot of you out there can. One thing I think you can say about Donald J. Trump is he has made a lot out of the opportunities that he was given. But whether you agree with that sentiment that he was given everything or not, what if he personally is thinking about finding ways to give as many Americans a similar life to the one that he did? As he said, he's had an easy life. He's admitted that. What does he need this for? He's done great. He's admitted that. By all intents and purpose, all measurements, he's a billionaire. He's been very successful. Sure, he's had multiple divorces, but he's had kids. He has kids that are still around him. Even his wives, his ex-wives, seem to be amicable situations in an amicable relationship with him personally. So yes, he's a flawed man, but in general, a lot of people, besides the presidency thing, before the presidency thing, if you're like, hey, would you want Donald J. Trump's level of success for your kids? Most people would say, for sure. So what if he wants that for most Americans? What if he wants Americans to have the opportunities to be supported and cared for and loved for by a family like he was? What if he wants to grant Americans the opportunity to make mistakes that result in growth instead of perpetual suffering? What if he wants them to have challenges that, even if they do fail from them, these are things that they can learn from only to come back stronger and better for it? As he said in the State of the Union speech, Americans are dreamers. They are actually the original OG dreamers. That's been one of the things that's been enshrined in American mythology, the American dream. Martin Luther King is an example of an American that had a dream. He had a dream that people would be judged by the content of their character, not superficial things like their skin or what they seem to be like, how you feel they make you feel, what tribe they may be from, or any other characteristic that's not intrinsic to the individual in question, to the choices and decisions that person made in who they are at the time. Not these arbitrary kind of divisions that can be signified by somebody just simply holding up a different flag than the one that you're holding. So that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you guys think. What does Make America Great Again mean to you? If you're Kenyan, let me know about what you think about what's happening with the political system, with Raila Odinga doing this people's presidency thing. And there's going to be links below to a few things that related to this video, including the Trump Train to Nagaland project. My main thought with that project was to have a situation where I could just go and publish and post raw video from political events and other people could do the same thing. I also wanted to go to more in a personal basis of expressing and showing how I actually made friends through my political process and seeing if other people did that, because in most cases people say they lose friends. So kind of explore that and see, why do people lose friends? Why do people make friends through politics? How is the whole Making America Great Again thing affecting people in their personal lives and the world in general? Just what's happening in the political paradigm shift that I think is going on, or just general paradigm shift that's going on, and that's going to show up in the political systems. So that's it for now. Like, share, and subscribe. Links below to the merchandise store, to the blog, and other things that you guys should check out. Let me know what you guys think. Goodbye.